What you are about to hear is an actual reading from a Chicago Tribune newspaper from the past. Everything that you will hear is exactly as it is written. Please keep in mind that the language used reflects the era it was written. If you enjoy these videos, please click like and also subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon. And now for the news. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Tuesday, February 4th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7 a.m. It will set at 5:08 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, considerable cloudiness today, becoming unsettled, a few degrees warmer, gentle to moderate winds, mostly southerly. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, slightly warmer. The low temperature 25 degrees, the high temperature 32. Today's headline, Fingerprint Race Betters. Groups of weary, sleepy-eyed men waited at midnight last night in the Central Police Building for busy policemen to take their fingerprints. Others, still in their stuffy cells, stamped about, threatening to sue Commissioner Aumann or wondering aloud what their wives were going to say when they got home. It was the first time in 20 years that Chicago police had sent handbook patrons to the Bureau of Identification to have their records, if any, looked up and to have their fingerprints recorded. The hapless individuals were the remnants of 144 horse race bettors arrested yesterday in police raids on two-loop handbooks. 10 police wagons spent more than 2 hours from 3:15 to 5:30 p.m. hauling the bookie patrons, 120 men and 24 women, to the central station. The women were released en masse at 6 o'clock when Louis Volin, the gambling syndicate bondsman, appeared with sufficient bond money. They were charged with disorderly conduct and warned they would be fingerprinted if arrested in a betting parlor again. Then they rushed home to cold dinners. The men were less fortunate. Volin didn't get to them until 7:45, and from that hour on, the procedure was tortuous and slow. By 10 o'clock, less than 100 had been sent home, and indications were that many would not get home till long after midnight. Although the women reportedly found the experience jovial, several chortling that it was the first time they'd been arrested in a handbook, and wasn't it fun. The men had less to be cheerful about, and their protests were loud and shrill. All right, to the President of the United States, grumbled a young man as he refused the lockup keeper's offer of a bologna sandwich. A man who said he was a lawyer announced he would sue Commissioner Aumann for false arrest. And now for world news. Cairo, Egypt, February 3rd. British forces driving a wedge into the heart of Italian Eritrea have occupied Berentu, the Middle East Command announced today. It said that there and on 3 other fronts of Premier Mussolini's embattled African empire, the Italians are retreating under the pounding of land and air forces. The entry into abandoned Berentu yesterday, after British bombers had cleared the way with slashing low-diving attacks, followed by a few hours the fall of Argadat, an important rail and highway center 40 miles to the north. British forces thrusting past Argadat in the northern sector of the Eritrean front were reported in hot pursuit of Italians, withdrawing toward Keren, about 110 miles inside Eritrea and 50 miles northwest of Asmara, Eritrean capital and ultimate British goal. With the British in command of Argadat, hub of a network of motor highways leading east, west, north, and south, Empire forces were within about 70 miles of Asmara and 100 miles from Massawa, Eritrea's major port on the Red Sea. British bombers roaring ahead of the British ground forces smashed at concentrations of motor transports west of the Eritrean capital and reported direct hits on the Italian columns. Deeper down in Africa, the British said that South African forces had pushed 10 miles inside Ethiopia from Kenya colony to occupy two Italian posts in the Dukana area, and that on a second Ethiopian front, the pursuit of Italians retreating toward Gondar is continuing. The Italians were said to be fighting against constant sniping by Ethiopian patriots. British headquarters at Nairobi, Kenya colony, announced that the South African forces pushing into southwestern Ethiopia near Lake Rudolph killed two Italian officers and 43 native soldiers and captured 3 officers and 50 natives along with machine guns, rifles, and ammunition. Our casualties were very slight, it added. The Nairobi communique said that in addition to El Gumu and Garai, 10 miles inside Ethiopia, the South Africans also captured a post at Nobak, 7 miles north of the border and west of Garai. Still, other British forces, the Middle East Command reported, penetrated deeper into Italian Somaliland. So great is the rout of Italians in East Africa, British sources said, that the fascists have taken to the bush and jungle with the British close behind them. Nowhere along the frontiers of these Italian colonies was there any resistance left, the British said. In North Africa, British sources gathering strength for an assault on the key concentrations of Italian troops in Benghazi, Libya, hurled an aerial offensive 300 miles further west with the bombing of an airdrome and railway center south and west of Tripoli. The attack occurred near the border of French Tunisia. The British said Castel Benito, 15 miles south of Tripoli, and Zanzur on the coast west of Tripoli were bombed Sunday and Monday. They added that at least 7 enemy aircraft grounded on the airdrome were destroyed. The Air Force Command said planes also machine gunned motor transport on the road west of the airport and on the main road, causing considerable damage. Earlier, it was announced that preparations for continuance of the advance west of Derna, Libya, were proceeding. Athens, February 3rd. The Italian resistance has been wiped out in 39 square miles of mountain range north of Klissura, Albania, a spokesman for counter-invading Greek forces said tonight. The heights occupied were in the Trebishina range, the spokesman said, and Italian counterattacks failed to dislodge the Greeks. The spokesman charged the Italians with ignoring Greek successes and denounced as a deliberate lie an Italian assertion that the Greeks had lost 300 dead in a recent setback. Split Yugoslavia, February 3rd. A concerted British-Greek submarine campaign against Italian military supply routes deep in the Adriatic Sea was indicated today by reports that 7 Italian vessels had been sunk recently. Travelers from the Yugoslavia island of Lisa, 50 miles south of here, reported that a submarine today sank the Italian freighter Vittorio Benito of about 5,000 tons and another unidentified 6,000-ton Italian vessel. There is no Vittorio Benito in Lloyd's Registry of Shipping, but it does list the 4,595-ton Italian merchant ship Vittorio Veneto, with a V, not a B. A heavy loss of life also is indicated. A small Italian rescue vessel riddled with machine gun bullets reached the island of Sota last night with 2 dead Italian sailors. In Milna Bay on the island of Hvar, 6 Italian bodies were reported washed ashore from the auxiliary warship Armago. 10 others were said to have been buried in the past 2 days on Hvar, and there were reports of many bodies seen floating at sea. Further details on the reported sinking by British submarine Friday of the armed Italian tug Ursa and a barge it was towing have been brought here. The submarine is said to said first to have torpedoed the Ursa and an armed concrete barge, and then a 6,000-ton freighter, which was described as having vanished in flames. It also tried to attack the Italian destroyer number 174, according to this report, but the destroyer escaped under a smokescreen. 4 seamen from the Ursa brought here aboard the Yugoslav steamer Bakar, which picked them up after they had been 2 days in open boat, gave the same account. The Bakar also brought the body of an Italian officer. London, February 3rd. The British Admiralty today reported that British naval planes had smashed yesterday at one of the main sources of power supply in Sardinia, Italy. It said that the attack by naval Swordfish aircraft was successful and that one plane failed to return. Rome, February 3rd. British planes attacked a dam across the Tirso River in Sardinia with bombs and torpedoes, but caused no damage, the Italian High Command declared today. One British plane was reported shot down by anti-aircraft fire and its crew was captured. The pilot of another, which crashed on the Tyrrhenian coast near Viareggio, also was reported captured. London, February 3rd. Single German raiders harassed British towns today and tonight. A high officer of the Air Force expressed the opinion that such forays would persist until a break in the weather permitted a return to mass bombing. But he asserted superior aircraft and pilots of Britain, again as last summer, will beat back any return to mass bombing as a preliminary to invasion. Raids today caused deaths and damage in London, East Anglia, Kent, northeastern England, and central Scotland. Only one raider was reported shot down during the day. It blew up over the Thames estuary after a British fighter plane with all guns blazing followed it to within 100 yards of the water. A raid alarm accompanied by a burst of anti-aircraft fire was heard in London shortly before midnight, but the warning ended within a few minutes. A German plane, apparently in continuation of hit-and-run raids of the day, caused the alarm. A number of incendiary bombs dropped by the raider were put out quickly by fire wardens. The raids of the day, including British attacks on the French and Belgian Channel coast, were made through a blizzard over the Strait of Dover. With the home forces in Britain, February 3rd. 30,000 men with 3,000 motor vehicles have just completed 48 hours of intensive maneuvers in which a segment of Great Britain's new army tested the muscles built up in 7 months of training. The exercises capped with the toughening process which Lord Gort, Inspector General of Training, instituted last summer. Most of the troops went sleepless for 48 hours. They completed long marches and movements of scores of miles in open transports in rain, wind, and sleet. They fought being in quotes, on 2 meals a day. Breakfast was snatched at dawn and supper was eaten after dark. New York, February 3rd. Early release of 58 Danish vessels to Great Britain is forecast in a story appearing tonight in the New York Daily News. The transfer is to be accompanied through formation in London of a National Danish Council to which owners' rights will be vested. Completion of the deal would give Britain an additional 450,000 tons of shipping, much of it among the fastest and most modern afloat. 15 ships totaling 250,000 tons are in New York Harbor, 23 are in other United States ports, and 20 more are in South and Central American ports. Britain chartered all available Norwegian and Dutch ships last spring, but withheld offers to Denmark because the country refused to set up an exiled regime in Britain. Formation of the council now would amount to a government in exile and pave the way for an early arrangement for the transfer. The council is to be made up of a group of influential Danish businessmen in London. They have been working with Prime Minister Winston Churchill to get the stranded vessels back into service. British and Danish officials in New York said they did not have any knowledge of the proposal, but Hans Isbrandston, owner of 7 ships and agent for most of the others, said an arrangement should come about in good time. London, February 3rd. The Admiralty announced tonight that 149 of the crew of the destroyer Acheron were missing. 5 were known to have been killed and 15 wounded when the craft was sunk on December 26th. Its loss was announced at that time, but no details were given. British naval casualties in the war to date, the Admiralty said, are 3,419 killed, 2,665 wounded, 5,699 missing, 79 dead from illness, and 114 prisoners. London, February 3rd. A large number of Italian prisoners were killed last Friday, the Admiralty announced today, when a British ship removing them from the Libyan coast of North Africa was bombed by planes believed to have been German. The Admiralty did not say just where the attack occurred, disclosing only that it was somewhere in the Mediterranean. The clue was indicated, however, by a German communique yesterday which said Nazi planes had attacked several British-occupied harbors in North Africa and that 3 merchantmen totaling 14,000 tons were sunk and 3 others damaged. An Italian communique further gave the date as the afternoon of January 31st, which coincided with the date given in the Admiralty announcement, and added that a 10,000-ton ship was sunk at Bardia, Libya. It said that Sollum Egyptian port near the Libyan border also was a target of the Nazis. Manchester, England, February 3rd. Kissed, cheered, and honored with the Red Rose of Lancaster, Wendell L. Willkie cut short its tour of North England's bomb-scarred industrial centers tonight to return to London for a meeting tomorrow with King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. He canceled a scheduled visit to Sheffield, famed steel manufacturing city, because of his plans to hurry back to Washington, D.C. to testify on the lease-lend bill. He said he had been requested by the British government for safety's sake not to divulge the time of his departure for America. Willkie appeared weary but in good spirits and visibly affected by what he had seen in an all-day tour of Manchester's bomb areas, a triumphal procession in which his automobile was constantly flanked by shouting, cheering throngs. "I found the answer to the question I set out to ask," he told reporters. "The people's spirit is magnificent. I don't believe any nation in the world is more united in any cause than the people of the British Isles." Willkie received the Red Rose of Lancaster, a high honor springing from the bloody 15th century Wars of the Roses, in which the red rose signified the House of Lancaster and the white rose the House of York, before a large crowd at the town hall. Then, holding the rose in his hand, since it was too large to wear, he set out for the busy river dockyards. An old woman handed him a bottle of beer and planted a kiss on his cheek. As a luncheon guest of Lord Derby at a Manchester hotel, Willkie met civic and industrial leaders while university students staged a demonstration that blocked traffic for an hour. Ankara, Turkey, February 4th. Colonel William J. Donovan left Ankara late last night for Palestine after conferring with Foreign Minister Şükrü Saraçoğlu, Premier Refik Saydam, and Turkish military leaders. The only comment Donovan, American official observer, made on his findings here was that he had received an excellent impression from his conversations. Although no official comment was made on the talks, foreign observers expressed belief that Donovan brought from President Roosevelt encouragement for Turkey to stand fast against Axis threats to the Balkan nations, and assurances that the United States is determined not to see Great Britain lose the war. Vichy, France, February 3rd. An end to the French-German crisis over collaboration, which began December 13th with the ouster of Vice Premier Foreign Minister Pierre Laval, appeared in sight tonight. It was announced here that Admiral Jean Darlan, the Navy minister, had begun negotiations in Paris with Laval on behalf of Chief of State Pétain. It was expected that Darlan's negotiations would lead at least to a settlement of conditions on which Laval, who accepts the German viewpoint, would return to the Vichy government without, however, being named as Pétain's successor as Chief of State. A thorny point now appears to be German suggestions that strategic points, especially in connection with the Mediterranean warfare, should be put at the disposition of Berlin and Rome. Bizerta, a naval base in Tunisia just opposite of Sicily, is said to be required to block the British war passage between North Africa and Sicily. Everything seems to hinge on whether a cession of Bizerta would be consistent with the armistice terms accepted by the French. Official circles were not certain about how long Darlan would be in Paris. It was thought he might be back in Vichy tomorrow or Wednesday and be accompanied by Laval if the negotiations are successful. They hinted tomorrow would be an important day. Such an eventuality probably would be accompanied by further modifications of the Pétain cabinet. It was expected that Laval, together with Darlan War Minister General Charles Hunsinger and Paul Baudoin, who also is slated to return to the government, would form a small operating committee under Pétain's direction. Such a group, it was believed, would suit the Germans. Under this setup, Pierre-Etienne Flandin, who succeeded Laval as foreign minister, might not remain, but Marshal Pérotin, Minister of the Interior, will stay, but in a different capacity. Official sources in Berlin asserted that they saw Laval as France's guarantor that the policies of rapprochement agreed on beaten Pétain and Adolf Hitler in their Montreux conversations last October would be carried out as far as France was concerned. These sources so far have taken no stand on the new French People's Committee in Paris, a pro-Nazi organization, but its formation follows a campaign of denunciation of the asserted failure of the Vichy government to cooperate with Germany. Rome, February 3rd. Authoritative fascists declared today that Italy had no knowledge of any French violation of armistice terms which would necessitate Italian action. Buenos Aires, Argentina, February 3rd. Argentina is studying application of an ancient Roman rule of international law to requisition idle shipping in ports to speed delivery of foodstuffs to Britain. A decision is reported near to take over 4 Danish ships as an initial move under the rule of Angari, forcible seizure of a vessel for public service, which Italy used in 1915 prior to her entry into the World War to requisition 34 vessels owned by Germany, her foe in that conflict, but now her ally. That rule, Argentines say, recognizes the right of nations to use idle shipping in their harbors urgently needed to meet national emergencies. Brazil hosts 230 refugee German, Italian, and Danish merchantmen, applied it in 1917 to seize 42 German vessels, and Spain in 1918 requisitioned 90 German ships. Argentina's seizure of the Danish ships likely would set off a wave of similar moves throughout South American nations to relieve their acute shortage of shipping. London, February 3rd. A special tax on private and professional incomes increased as a result of the war may be imposed in the next budget, it was announced tonight. The excess profits tax, now 100%, applies only to company profits. It has been urged upon the Treasury that this principle should be extended. It is believed that its application to all incomes within the present income tax limits yields substantial additional revenue. London, February 3rd. The Ministry of Home Security announced today it was issuing gas masks of a special type for persons unable to wear the standard type because of breathing difficulties or other physical ailments. The press has been urging the ministry to compel all citizens to resume the carrying of masks. Windsor, Ontario, February 3rd. Finance Minister James L. Ilsley said today that the most critical period of the war was at hand. He warned Canadians that price rises or rationing might result if surplus earnings and profits were spent for non-essentials. It seems likely that 300,000 additional workers will be needed for the war effort, he said in a broadcast. He expressed doubt as to whether that many could be obtained without drawing upon non-essential industries and occupations, and added, price rises or rationing are apt to spread as shortages become more general unless we can persuade people to limit their expenditures and lend their money to the nation for war purposes. Bucharest, Romania, February 3rd. General Ion Antonescu's government issued a communique tonight naming as the big three of the recent Iron Guard rebellion Horia Sima, Vice Premier and Iron Guard Party head, General George Petrovicescu, former Minister of the Interior and Director of Gendarmes Gika. Sima still is sought. The other two are under arrest. Cape Town, Union of South Africa, February 3rd. Prime Minister General Jan Christian Smuts announced today that weekend rioting in Johannesburg will be investigated and compensation paid for damage to property. In addition, military authorities are taking disciplinary action, he told the South African House of Assembly. Earlier, General Smuts issued a special order admonishing troops to observe orderly conduct, even in the face of frequent provocation. Johannesburg, the capital of Transvaal province, was reported quiet today after the rioting between soldiers and civilians suspected of anti-British sympathies, which had sent 140 persons to hospitals. Military leaves were canceled as authorities sought to prevent a recurrence of the disorders. Havana, Cuba, February 4th, Tuesday. Vice President Fulgencio Batista, moving quickly amid a tense political situation, assumed personal command of Cuba's army and appointed new Navy and National Police heads early today. Batista dismissed three men whom he accused of adopting attitudes of open sedition against the government late last night. They were Colonel Jose Pedraza, Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant Colonel Angela Gonzalez, Navy Commander-in-Chief, and Lieutenant Colonel Bernardo Garcia, head of the National Police Force, who resigned 2 days ago. Both Gonzalez and Pedraza have been arrested. Army guards mounted machine guns and threw up sandbag barricades about the presidential palace just before Batista made his announcement from Army headquarters at Camp Columbia. Batista appointed Lieutenant Colonel Jesus Gomez Casas as the new Navy commander and Colonel Manuel Benitez as police chief. The political storm began Saturday when Batista accepted the resignation of Police Chief Garcia. Early today, Batista suspended constitutional guarantees for 10 days. And now national news. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. The Senate voted today for a $350 million emergency shipbuilding program. Passed without a record vote, the measure carried $313,500,000 in new appropriations to be used with $36,500,000 available from other sources in building 200 steel cargo vessels as well as new shipbuilding facilities. The Senate accepted an amendment requested by the Maritime Commission to provide $65 million of additional contract authority for the Commission's regular shipbuilding program. The House must concur in this and other amendments. During discussion of the measure, Senator Adams, Democrat Colorado, said that maritime officials had testified the new ships were for American use and not designed to meet the requirements of Great Britain or other foreign powers. The ships, he said, would be practically obsolete in design and slower than most modern cargo vessels, with a view to constructing them cheaply and expeditiously without interfering with schedules of the Navy or Maritime Commission. The Senate rewrote a House provision prohibiting payment of any of the funds to persons engaged in subversive activity. As revised, an affidavit from a worker would be accepted as prima facie evidence that he did not advocate overthrow of the government by violence. Without such a modification, Adams contended the restriction would be impossible to administer. Senator Bailey, a Democrat, North Carolina, expressed the opinion that the amendment was worthless because under it, Harry Bridges, West Coast labor leader, could make an affidavit and get employment. You are not getting anywhere, he said, when you permit a fifth columnist to make a prima facie case by his own affidavit. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. Passage of President Roosevelt's dictator bill would constitute a congressional mandate to the chief executive to involve the United States in war, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee was told today by Philip La Follette, former governor of Wisconsin. La Follette was followed by Norman Thomas, head of the Socialist Party, who declared the proposed legislation would set up a Hitler over the American people. Both witnesses declared that the United States would inevitably be drawn into the European war if the bill is passed. Both assailed the administration's campaign of fear as intended to terrorize the people into belief that German invasion was imminent if Great Britain should fall. Thomas called such tactics little short of criminal. La Follette, who traveled extensively in Europe just before the war, asserted there was a large bloc of influential opinion in Great Britain which feels much closer to Nazi Germany than to the United States. He reminded the legislators that German and British industry entered into a trade pact in February 1939 in which they pledged collaboration against the United States. The agreement, later suspended, was made, he noted, after Hitler had been in power for 6 years and had shocked the world with his bloody persecutions of minorities. The administration is keeping mum on a possibility, which is a real risk in the case of our entrance into the war on Britain's side, La Follette said. That danger, he said, is that after the British bargaining position has been greatly enhanced by alliance with the United States, a new Hoare-Laval deal may be made, which would suddenly leave this nation alone at war with all the world. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. Passage of President Roosevelt's dictator bill will plunge this country into war within 6 months, Representative Hamilton Fish, Republican, New York, warned today as the House began debate on the administration's measure to counter unprecedented powers on the chief executive. There were numerous other attacks on the bill during the day's discussion, which will last through tomorrow and Wednesday. Consideration of opposition amendments is scheduled to begin on Thursday. No power can successfully wage war against the United States from the jungles of South America, said Fish, who opened the attack on the measure. So far as the Monroe Doctrine is concerned, if any nation seeks to establish bases in South America, then I am in favor of using our Navy and going to war. But if this dictator bill is passed unamended, I predict that within 6 months we will be involved in war in Europe and Asia, that the government will take over our vital industries, that our civil rights will be suspended, and that we will have a dictatorship in America comparable to the Nazis and communists. Representative Francis P. Bolton, Republican, Ohio, charged that the bill represents the greatest step yet in the accepted practices of the last 8 years to transfer bit by bit powers of Congress to the chief executive. Opposition to the legislation is not confined to the minority party, she said, but extends to many Democrats. Make no mistake about my opposition to this bill, Mrs. Bolton told the House. I am not opposing aid to Britain. I am opposing a bill which cannot bring aid to Britain in time and which will mean the surrender of our powers as members of Congress. Let us give Britain whatever help she needs without giving one man the powers of a dictator. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. Representative Everett M. Dirksen, Republican Illinois, today charged during the House debate on the Roosevelt dictator bill that a Capitol visit of Lord Halifax, new British ambassador, was an extraordinary procedure and demanded an explanation. Just as Representative Saul Bloom, Democrat, New York, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, concluded an argument that the dictator bill would keep war away from the United States, Dirksen jumped to his feet and demanded a report of what occurred when Halifax called on Bloom last Saturday. Bloom, who had pleaded weariness a moment before, sprang to his microphone in the House, his face flushed. In a tense voice, he replied that the only things mentioned at the meeting were the exhibition of the Magna Carta at the New York World's Fair and the procedure to be followed in Congress on the dictator bill. Bloom called Dirksen's question very improper and added, if the gentlemen want to get into trouble with other nations, the quickest way is to be suspicious of everything other nations do, as is the case here today. New York, February 3rd. The visits of Viscount Halifax, British ambassador, to Representative Saul Bloom, Democrat, New York, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Senator Walter F. George, Democrat, Georgia, in connection with the dictatorship bill are intended to help our officials find means to fool Americans into entering the war, the New York chapter of the America First Committee charged today. Endorsing the Chicago Committee's indignant telegrams to both members of Congress for talking over the measure with a foreign envoy, the New York chapter denounced the meetings as a gross violation of American tradition and said numerous wires of protest have been received at its offices. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt said today that she would not participate in forthcoming meetings of the American Youth Congress because of its attitude on American foreign policy. President and Mrs. Roosevelt both spoke to delegates to the Congress last year. Mrs. Roosevelt also attended many of the sessions and had youth leaders as guests at the White House. She said at her press conference today that last year the youth groups had not finally arrived at the attitude they now have regarding American foreign policy, and she participated in the hope that they would not take the attitude that they did. Discussing the aims of the groups, Mrs. Roosevelt said that she was in agreement with their attitude on the things they want to see accomplished for young people, but I am not in agreement with their attitude on our foreign policy, which I consider fundamental to achieving the things they want accomplished in this country. I could not participate in the meeting and seem to be in agreement with them. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. The bill raising the national debt limit from $45 billion to $65 billion was made the next order of business today as the House received information on funds spent on defense so far this fiscal year and an estimate of additional sums that will require Treasury borrowing far in excess of the present debt limit. The Ways and Means Committee reported the debt limit bill, which also provides for taxing the income of future issues of federal securities. The bill also eliminates a special $4 billion debt category set up last session for national defense needs outside of the regular budget, the significance being that future special revenues are not to be earmarked to retire specific defense bond issues. The vote of the committee was along partisan lines after the Republicans had failed to amend the measure to hold the increase in the debt limit to $56.5 billion. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. By a vote of 5-2, the Supreme Court held today that unionists could not be prosecuted for conspiracy to restrain interstate commerce under the Sherman antitrust law for picketing and boycotting activities resulting from a jurisdictional dispute between two AFL unions at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery in St. Louis. The opinion bears vitally on the Department of Justice's antitrust law enforcement campaign. In arguing the case before the Supreme Court, Assistant Attorney General Thurman Arnold had contended that labor should be given every opportunity to organize, but should not be permitted to destroy itself by factional wars. Charles H. Tuttle, attorney for the labor officials, told the court that Arnold's argument substantially was that any jurisdictional strike is illegal under the Sherman Act. It would be a strange day if this court upheld that, Tuttle added. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. A sweeping decision of the Supreme Court today upheld the constitutionality of the wage hour law in all its phases and went on to overrule a 1918 decision which had denied Congress the right to outlaw child labor. The court's action raised speculation as to whether a controversial constitutional amendment submitted in 1924 but ratified so far by only 28 of the required 36 states would become a dead issue. This amendment would empower Congress to limit, regulate, and prohibit the labor of persons under 18 years of age. Supreme Court also rules that unions cannot be prosecuted under the Sherman antitrust law. Officials at the Children's Bureau said they would continue to press for ratification of the amendment since 3/4 of all child labor is employed in interstate industry, but the court's decision appeared to place at least a large part of this within the control of Congress, along with all child labor in interstate industry. San Juan, Puerto Rico, February 3rd. Guy J. Swope of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, was inaugurated today as civil governor of Puerto Rico. He succeeded Admiral William D. Leahy, now ambassador to France. Swope, formerly the island's auditor, promised retirement of up to $5 million of the island's indebtedness by the end of the fiscal year if current revenue collections continued. At St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, Governor Charles Harwood was inaugurated. Los Angeles, California, February 3rd. In a revolutionary change of pilot production policy, the Army Air Corps late last month will inaugurate an experiment designed to transfer basic training of its flyers from service schools to private contractors, it was learned today. Cal Aero Academy's division at Ontario, California, has been selected as the guinea pig for a test which may completely change the Army's method of training pilots. Previously, only primary flight tutelage was undertaken by private contractors at 9 aviation schools. Under the test, to be directed by Major C.C. Cosley, Cal Aero president and World War flyer, the second basic stage of making competent combat pilots out of raw recruits will be attempted. The program, if successful, will free hundreds of veteran Army Air Corps pilots now engaged as instructors at Randolph Field, Moffett Field, and other basic training bases so they can fill out tactical squadrons of heavy bombers and pursuit planes. Some will go into the work of administering tactical training. Basic training, it was disclosed, involves no actual military flying. Thus, Cal Aero, one of America's largest Army contract schools, will handle the second 6-week period of developing a fully equipped pilot and will further the man's technique in precision and night flying. Morton, Washington, February 3rd. 2 lumberjacks came out of the forest near here today with word that they had discovered the wreckage of a twin-motored Army bomber missing since January 16th, smashed and half buried on a rugged and inaccessible hillside. 7 men were aboard the bomber on its ill-fated flight toward the Muroc Lake bombing range in California. The pair who discovered the wreckage, Harry and Bill Studhalter, said all undoubtedly were killed. Major C.B. Overacker, commander of the 73rd Bombardment Squadron to which the plane and crew belonged, questioned the 2 brothers. They told them they saw the wreckage from a distance of about 200 yards through glasses. Major Overacker placed the wreck scene at about 3½ miles by airline from this little lumbering community in eastern Lewis County, about 30 miles southwest of towering Mount Rainier. C.I. Kimple, publisher of the weekly Morton Mirror, said the brothers told them they saw the plane when it passed over their home in Bear Canyon on January 16th at an altitude of about 600 feet. Generally adverse weather was reported over the region that day, and the brothers said they could not figure how the plane would negotiate Huckleberry Mountain at such an altitude. Army officers kept the discoverers away from interrogators, and Army orders said that all non-official civilians would be prohibited from entering the region. An official group representing the Army, state, and county agencies gathered here tonight in mountaineers and lumberjacks clothing, ready for the trek into the tangled forest region tomorrow morning. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. The War Department estimated today that the expanding Army, already the largest in the country's peacetime history, would reach a total of 1,418,000 officers and men by June 15th this year. Officials estimated that 1,317,100 would be in uniform by that date at 147 Army posts in the continental United States. This indicated that about 100,000 additional men would be stationed at overseas garrisons such as Hawaii, the Panama Canal, Puerto Rico, and Newfoundland. The total strength predicted by June 15th is nearly twice that of the force now under arms. Among the largest forces expected to be stationed at different posts or camps by June 15th are 60,900 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 53,200 at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, 50,600 at Camp Blanding, Florida, 48,100 at Fort Lewis, Washington, 43,100 at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, 34,700 at Fort Leonard Wood, Rolla, Missouri, 32,000 at Fort Ord, California, and 29,800 at Camp Bowie, Brownwood, Texas. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. An expansion of offices to encourage wider subcontracting on defense projects and to advise defense contractors generally was announced today. The Office of Production Management said that its Office of Small Business Activities would be known hereafter as the Defense Contract Service, and that for administrative purposes it was being transferred from the Division of Purchases to the Production Division. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. Construction of 14,375 dwelling units for workers engaged in national preparedness production was recommended today by C.F. Palmer, Defense Housing Coordinator, in a program submitted to President Roosevelt. 14 states, the District of Columbia, and Alaska and Puerto Rico are included in the program. In each of the areas specified, an acute shortage of defense housing requiring action now exists, the report stated. Under the National Housing Act, none of the dwellings can cost more than $3,500. Among these suggested constructions were 150 dwellings at Alton and 100 at Rantoul, Illinois, 500 at South Bend and 400 at Charleston, Indiana, and 400 at Wichita, Kansas. Albany, New York, February 3rd. Governor Herbert H. Lehman announced today that New York industries taking part in the National Rearmament Program would be permitted to amortize the cost of expanding their facilities over a 5-year period and deduct such costs from state income taxes. He said that no legislative action was necessary to amend the present franchise tax on business corporations to permit such deductions. All new plants built with private funds specifically to aid the rearmament program or additions to existing plants which are used for manufacturing of defense material are automatically covered by the governor's announcement. West Palm Beach, Florida, February 4th. The United States liner Manhattan was floated shortly before last midnight from a sandbar on which it won aground on January 12th. 3 tugs pulled mightily on the 24,000-ton vessel during the incoming tide, while 2 others churned up sand and on the shore side. The ship was dragged a final 75 feet into deep water at 1 a.m. She was a mile offshore. It was considered likely the $10 million ship would remain in the vicinity for a day or two while supplies which had been removed were returned aboard. The Manhattan probably will be taken to dry dock. Detroit, Michigan, February 3rd. Henry Ford, apostle of mass production, expects to have opportunity yet to put manufacture of aviation engines on a volume output basis. Essential to this achievement, he believes, is adaptation of automobile engine manufacturing technique to the production of certain parts of the aircraft motor. As a result, he is working on a mass production engine of his own. The manufacturer and those associated with him in several months of experimental work on aviation engines at his plant in Dearborn believe a proper coordination of supplies and manufacturing processes can eliminate any bottlenecks of materials, machines, men, and time. Ford already has proved to his own satisfaction that certain phases of automobile motor manufacturing technique can be applied to the making of an aviation engine. Chief of these is substitution of casting for forging operations to reduce the time needed for machining of forged parts. Ford has a contract for the production of 4,000 Pratt & Whitney radial air-cooled aviation engines. Nearing completion at his River Rouge plant is a $21 million factory unit in which to build them. They will be constructed entirely according to Pratt & Whitney specifications, and once operations are underway, they will be turned out at the rate of one an hour. But the idea of devoting an hour to the assembling of one engine irks Ford. He has in the making now a 12-cylinder V-type liquid-cooled motor with an injector fuel system and an exhaust-operated supercharger. He hopes to make 1,000 a month. Detroit, Michigan, February 3rd. Harry H. Bennett, personnel director of the Ford Motor Company, today said the company had conferred frequently with officials of the American Federation of Labor in the past and will continue to do so in the future, but has no intention of signing a contract with any Federation union. Commenting on the announcement of an organization drive by the AFL to charter local unions for Ford production employees, Bennett said, "We have done business with the AFL for 21 years, ever since I came with the company." Bennett said the company frequently had settled disputes with officials of AFL skilled craftsmen unions and with committees of Federation members, although it has not as yet met with representatives of the new production unions. "We will do the same thing with the AFL production unions that we did with the Skilled Crafts Union of the Federation," he added. Greenville, Pennsylvania, February 3rd. County Detective A.C. Barnes reported today that Victor Diesler, 43-year-old Greenville manufacturer, apparently had been attacked, robbed, and spirited from his office last night. Investigating Diesler's failure to return home from the office in the Diesler Machine Company plant, police found an iron bar and splotches of blood in the office. The safe was open and empty, and papers were scattered on the floor. About $600, which Diesler had taken to the office to place in the safe, was missing, and his automobile was gone. Footprints showed that someone apparently had peered through a rear window of the plant, but a light snow during the night obliterated any other tracks. The car was found today in Youngstown, Ohio. Clearwater, Florida, February 3rd. Mrs. Dulcie Meyer, formerly a nurse in the Lake Bluff, Illinois home of George R. Jocelyn, son of a wealthy electrical supplies manufacturer, denied at a special hearing here today that she had ever seen attorney Thomas H. Fisher enter or leave the bedroom of Jocelyn's wife, Charlotte. The hearing was held by Master in Chancery John J. Kelly in connection with Fisher's petition for $24,132 in fees from Jocelyn for representing Mrs. Jocelyn in her recent divorce action. Jocelyn is contesting the petition on the ground that the relations between Fisher and Mrs. Jocelyn were more than those of lawyer and client. Mrs. Meyer said she certainly would have known if Fisher visited Mrs. Jocelyn several evenings in her bedroom, as two other former servants had previously testified. Mrs. Jocelyn had branded the charges as complete and absolute lies. Mrs. Myers said she came to Clearwater to undergo an operation which was performed last December. Chattanooga, Tennessee, February 3rd. A CIO organizer and 7 members of the CIO-affiliated Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers Union were sentenced to federal prison today by District Judge Leslie R. Darr. They were convicted last week of conspiracy to dynamite a power line which served an open shop mine against which they were striking. 2-year sentences were given to M.C. Anderson of Bessemer, Alabama, the organizer, Ed Simmons, Felton Woodward, Earl Hubbard, John Queen, R.L. Ballo, and R.L. Rhodes. Marion L. Ellis was sentenced to serve 15 months. Anderson was fined $5,000. All of the others except Ellis were fined $1,000 each. The power line was dynamited last April 1st, putting 1,300 employees of the Tennessee Copper Company out of work until a new line could be erected. The mine had been beset by labor trouble for more than a year, and at the time of the bombing was the target for a CIO closed shop drive. Washington, D.C., February 3rd. The administration may ask Congress soon for funds to start construction of a new hydroelectric power project on the Colorado River, 75 miles below Boulder Dam, to help meet an anticipated power shortage in the Southern California area. Reclamation Bureau officials today said that preliminary findings placed the probable cost of the proposed dam at $22,500,000 and the capacity of its power plant at 180,000 kilowatts. Many defense industries are located in Southern California. Cleveland, Ohio, February 3rd. Coroner Samuel R. Gerber today returned a verdict of suicide because of ill health in the death of Mrs. Alice G. Carnegie, 56, wife of William C. Carnegie, a nephew of the late Andrew Carnegie, steel magnate. The body was found yesterday hanging by a cloth belt attached to a bedpost at the home of a sister, Mrs. Ann Hornberger. And now back to local and regional news. General Robert E. Wood, acting national chairman of the America First Committee, charged yesterday that the American people have been fed a propaganda designed to play upon their fears and to thus gradually work them up to the point where they will be willing to enter the European war as a belligerent. He made the charge during a debate with former Senator Ernest W. Gibson of Vermont, national chairman of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies, at a luncheon sponsored by Advertising Men's Post number 38 of the American Legion in the Grand Ballroom of the Hotel Sherman. An audience of 1,250 persons heard the speakers discuss the policies of their organizations. This government propaganda, General Wood continued, has profoundly influenced the American people, but it has not altered their determination to stay out of war. They may be tricked into entering the war by the passage of Bill 1776, the President's War Dictatorship Bill, but if the question is put up to them squarely, there is no doubt as to their stand. Prolonged applause greeted this statement. General Wood declared that by building an impregnable defense, the United States could stand off any invasion attempt. What the American people need above all else is faith in themselves, not faith in England, General Wood said. This country never will be conquered by outside attack. It will only go under if it loses faith in itself. Gibson said the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies believes Hitler meant what he said when Germany declared that Germany would conquer the world. The only possible way to remain at peace is to give all possible aid to Britain, Gibson added. If the Allies fall, war inevitably will come to America. If the Allies win, America will not be involved in the war. We must ensure that victory or soon America will be involved in war on our own shores. Gibson defended the War Dictatorship Bill on the ground that such wide powers were necessary to the defense of the United States. Springfield, Illinois, February 3rd. Representative Reed F. Cutler, Republican Lewistown, chairman of the House Executive Committee, today predicted speedy action on the resolution of Representative Lottie Holman O'Neill, Republican Downers Grove, urging the defeat of the Roosevelt Dictator Bill. The O'Neill resolution introduced last Wednesday was referred to the executive committee of which Cutler is chairman. Immediately after the conference, she asked him to set an early date for consideration. I told her, said Cutler, that the subject was of such great importance that no time should be lost by the committee or by the House as a whole. Under a new provision of the rules, however, at least 24 hours notice must be given. That means the earliest possible hearing will be Wednesday, and I shall post the required notice for a meeting to be held immediately after the morning session on Wednesday. At least 350 Chicago women are expected to descend upon Washington in the Mothers' Crusade to defeat Bill 1776, Mrs. Thomas Keefe, one of its 5 directors, said Wednesday. The group, which hopes to send 5,000 mothers to Washington to lobby against the administration's dictator measure, plans to leave as soon as the bill goes to the Senate. Mrs. Keefe said, a special round-trip coach rate of $20.85 has been offered, she said. Mothers wishing to join, she said, should call the Loop headquarters of the group, Harrison 3576, or its South Side headquarters, Prospect 3991. The first mass meeting will be held at 8 p.m. tomorrow in the Alpine Room of the LaSalle Hotel. 200 members of church and civic organizations who are seeking to keep the Saguenay district on the northwest side of the city, northwest side dry, crowded into the county court yesterday. They listened to a hearing before Judge Paul H. Reese of Belleville on the legality of balloting at the November election, in which the community in the 39th Ward voted to ban liquor. The Wets charged disqualified persons voted and that the petitions to place the liquor question on the ballot were signed illegally. The hearing was continued until today. Memphis, Tennessee, February 3rd. The 1st Regiment of the 33rd Division Illinois National Guard will arrive at Camp Forest, Tennessee, March 10th, following induction March 5th. The last unit will arrive March 21st. This schedule was given out today by the Office of Lieutenant General Benjamin Lear, commander of the 2nd Army. The dates set for the arrival of Chicago units and the areas they are to occupy are 108th Quartermaster Regiment, March 10th, Area H, 108th Medical Regiment, March 11th, west half of Area K, if east half not ready, 108th Engineer Regiment, March 12th, Area F, 124th Field Artillery, 75mm, March 13th, Area I, 122nd Field Artillery, 75mm, March 14th, Area I, 131st Infantry, March 20th, Area N, 132nd Infantry, March 21st, Area O. The dates set for the other Illinois regiments and their areas are 123rd Field Artillery, 155mm, Northern and Western Illinois, March 15th, Area J, 129th Infantry, Northern Illinois, March 18th, Area L, 130th Infantry, Southern Illinois, March 19th, Area M. Division Headquarters, Headquarters Detachment, and probably the Division Special Troops will move from Chicago to Camp Forest as soon as possible after March 5th. Major General Samuel T. Lawton, the division commander, said on Sunday he probably would assign part of his staff to remain in Chicago until the last of the units had cleared the city or until the last details of the move are taken care of. Most of the troops will travel by rail to Tullahoma and march the 2.5 miles to the camp. Motorized units, the 108th Quartermaster Regiment and the Field Artillery, will move half their troops by truck, the rest following on trains. There is not enough organic motor equipment in the 33rd Division to make the entire movement by truck. The camp at present is a field of mud. The mud is kept churning by the hundreds of trucks used on the construction jobs that pull off the road to dump their loads. Progress has been made on the construction of streets, but they will not be entirely finished by the time the troops arrive. There was no confirmation at 2nd Army headquarters here of a report that the tour of duty of the 33rd Division and other National Guard troops will be extended to 16 months. Neither was there confirmation in Washington, D.C. Attorney Daniel D. Carmel, one of the leading labor lawyers of the Middle West, yesterday defended labor's stand for the 40-hour week and argued that defense needs will be adequately served by labor without any lengthening of the hours of a day's work. He spoke at a luncheon of the City Club on Labor and National Defense. Carmel is an assistant state's attorney general assigned to the Industrial Commission. He is the attorney for the city and state federations of labor and represents several international unions. Labor knows that when a nation has reached an all-time high in production, as we have, and it still is with over 8 million unemployed people, laboring hours should be shortened rather than lengthened if we are to have economic stability and maintain our democratic way of life, Carmel asserted. Suppliers of zinc, copper, and nickel have adopted rationing of those metals to users as a result of defense demands, a survey of Chicago companies disclosed yesterday. Other developments have included setting back of delivery dates in many cases, refusal to accept new customers by some dealers, and the requirement by metal producers of data on the intended use of their shipments and the priority number for government orders. Although the market was described as tight for all three metals, the greatest difficulty was reported in supplying zinc. The government, meanwhile, is attempting to prevent increases in scrap prices. Leaders of the Chicago Urban League pledged themselves last night at the league's 25th anniversary dinner at the Chicago Women's Club to work for equal participation for Negroes in the National Defense Program, both in the armed forces and in industry. Principal speaker at the dinner was Lester Granger, newly appointed Assistant Executive Secretary and Director of the Development of Industrial Regulations of the National Urban League in New York City. The league works for the Negroes' social and economic betterment. Granger asserted that the present defense preparation is an opportunity to impress upon the nation the talents of the Negroes. He said the league plans to ask industrial leaders to allow Negro workers equal opportunity in their factories and to call upon union officials to remove restrictions from their membership. The dinner also marked the launching of a campaign to raise $25,000 to carry on welfare work among the city's Negroes. Alderman Earl B. Dickerson's Second Ward is president of the Chicago League. The league was organized to alleviate problems made serious at the time by the heavy migration of Negroes from the South. James W. Breen yesterday assumed his duties as Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Chicago office. He replaces Edwin T. Breen, first assistant to former Attorney General Johnny Cassidy, who has resigned from his post as head of the Chicago office and will return to private practice here February 15th. James W. Breen was named to the post Sunday by Attorney General George F. Barrett. Judge Julius H. Minor in criminal court yesterday denied a motion for probation for Joseph Kostek and sentenced him to 1 year to life in prison. Kostek had pleaded guilty to a robbery charge last week. Last August, he and three Confederates held up the Hurley Machine Company at 2115 South 54th Avenue, Cicero, and fled with $1,406. Most of the money was recovered when the bandit car crashed. Kostek was found cowering under a porch. The others escaped. Roy Dowling, 35 years old, 4425 Normal Avenue, a laborer, was shot in the back and wounded seriously last night by policeman Roy Gallagher as Dowling and three companions fled after an altercation with a streetcar conductor at 47th and Morgan Streets. Policeman Gallagher said one of the men struck the conductor with an empty beer bottle after their automobile stalled on the streetcar tracks. Gallagher said the men disregarded his cries to stop. 3 true bills charging statutory rape and the taking of indecent liberties with children were reported voted by the grand jury yesterday against Wesley E. Bennett, 57 years old, 4935 North Mozart Avenue, a steel salesman. Bond was reported set at $15,000 in each case. Bennett was arraigned earlier in the day in felony court, where the rape charges were continued to February 21st. Bennett was arrested January 31st on the complaint of 3 Mexican girls, 2 13-year-old and the other 11. They told Lieutenant Louis Caparelli of the Maxwell Street station that he had illicit relations with them in the apartment of Mrs. Henrietta Hatcher, colored, of 370 East 58th Street. Bennett, who is married, admitted having taken the children for automobile rides, but denied immoral conduct with them. Albert Waldman, owner of a tavern at 164 North Michigan Avenue and a retail liquor store at 104 South Clark Street, was deprived of his cigarette and liquor licenses for both establishments yesterday. Captain Thomas Duffy of the Central Station said the revocation was ordered by Mayor Kelly and Commissioner Allman on complaint the tavern was a disorderly house. Police from Allman's and Duffy's offices closed the tavern last week and arrested Waldman, 2 employees, and 9 patrons. 3 of 4 men indicted last week on charges of conspiracy to file false schedules and affidavits in connection with an investigation of personal property tax frauds pleaded not guilty yesterday before Chief Justice James A. Farty. The case was assigned to Judge Walter Labai of Criminal Court for trial on February 24th. The 3 are John P. Grace, 40 years old, and George W. Holsby, Jr., 28, tax consultants at 77 West Washington Street, and John P. Daly, 28, a notary public. The 4th man, Walter Westgate, 40, has not yet surrendered. He is a solicitor for the tax firm. The 3 are free on bonds of $2,500 each. Payless 2-week vacations for county employees were taken under consideration by the County Board Finance Committee yesterday as a substitute for proposed pay cuts. Members of the committee returned to the vacation plan of economy after employee groups and civilian organizations had condemned pay cuts at a public hearing on the tentative budget for 1941. Daniel Ryan, acting chairman of the committee, called another meeting for this afternoon. Douglas Sutherland, executive secretary of the Civic Federation and Bureau of Public Efficiency, recommended a $20,000 appropriation for a survey of county personnel as a step toward retrenchment. The committee adopted the recommendation proposing that Sutherland select a staff and make the survey himself. If the city administration obtains a $53 million loan from the federal government for the new Unified Traction Company, the city fathers probably will lose one of the sweetest bonanzas in municipal history, the right to borrow money from the Traction Fund. This was revealed yesterday when Alderman James R. Quinn, 50th Ward, chairman of the Council Transportation Committee, said approximately 50 changes must be made in the proposed ordinance for Unified Traction. Quinn said the charges are demanded by Jesse H. Jones, federal loan administrator, and that the loan from the Reconstruction Finance Corporation will not be forthcoming unless they are made. Telephones in service in Chicago on January 31st totaled 1,037,250, a new record and an increase of 4,348 over the 1,032,902 total at the end of December, the Illinois Bell Telephone Company reported yesterday. The gain in new telephones during December came to 3,608, while during January a year ago the increase was 4,835. The number of telephones in service as of January 31st, 1940 amounted to 1,002,009. Company officials said that the last 2 years had seen a steady increase in the number of telephones in the city. And in sports, Elmer Layden, one of the most widely known figures of intercollegiate football, has developed, yesterday resigned as athletic director and head coach at Notre Dame to accept the appointment as commissioner of professional football. A majority membership of the National Football League completed negotiations with Layden on Saturday to enter into a contract as chief executive of the professional game. Layden's contract is for 5 years at an annual salary of $20,000. It will become effective on March 1st. Lafayette, Indiana, February 3rd. Purdue's Big Ten title defenders pulled up into a contending position in the championship race by scoring their second consecutive resounding victory tonight, 49-29 over Illinois. It was the third victory in 5 Big Ten games for the Boilermakers and the second defeat in a like number of conference games for the Illini. The game left the two quintets tied in the conference standings with 600 marks. The Boilermakers were trailing 12-7 and had scored only one field goal when the first period was half over. Purdue's speedy attack, however, started to function. Led by Bob Riley and Don Blanken, the Boilermakers drove under the basket on fast breaks and were out in front at intermission time 26-17. The Illini were never able to recover after the Purdue rally, and at one time in the second half, Purdue held a 17-point lead, 42-25. The Illini were minus two of their first semester stars, Walter Evers and Henry Sachs, due to scholastic deficiencies, but their replacements, Harold Shapiro and Victor Wukovitz, were among the most affected point producers for the losers. Bloomington, Indiana, February 3rd. Indiana's basketball team, still feeling the sting of its Big Ten defeat at Purdue, came back tonight to defeat Ohio State 45-25 and take second place in the conference race. Indiana led at the half 26-17. After the starting Indiana 5 failed to hit its usual fast-breaking offensive pace. 6 substitutes went in and they increased the tempo. 15 Indiana players took part. Johnny Logan, sophomore forward, led the Hoosier attack with 12 points, scored on 3 field goals and 6 free throws. Dick Fisher, junior forward, paced the Buckeyes with 10 points, although he missed 7 free throws. In winning their fourth conference game in 5, the Hoosiers also took the lead in the all-time series with the Buckeyes, as each school previously had won 22 games. Iowa City, Iowa, February 3rd. Iowa remained in the running for the Big Ten basketball championship tonight by triumphing 58-36 over Chicago. A crowd of 9,800 watched the Hawkeyes, paced by little Vic Siegel, who scored 20 points, build up a comfortable 27-15 halftime lead, and coast to their third conference victory. The Maroons, with Jack Fons contributing 6 points, cut their deficit to 33-27 early in the second half, but Iowa pulled away at this point and held Chicago to 7 points the remaining 15 minutes. It was the fourth consecutive Big Ten defeat for Chicago. Notre Dame, Indiana, February 3rd. Notre Dame's basketball team, victorious in 11 out of 14 games this season, will risk its 7-game winning streak against the University of North Dakota here tomorrow night. After North Dakota comes Northwestern here Saturday night. Despite the absence of Captain Eddie Riska, high-scoring forward who has a broken bone in his left foot, Notre Dame has turned in impressive victories over Michigan State and Marquette in recent starts. The 58-40 victory over the Hilltoppers Saturday left Notre Dame with 700 points for the season, or 50 points per game. Manager Paul Thompson of the Blackhawks yesterday recalled Bill Masienko, a 19-year-old rookie right wing from Providence, and held a tryout for goalie Horace Lamarche. Masienko will be sent to Kansas City when he reports today. Pep Kelly was dispatched to Providence to replace Masienko. Lamarche is a star with the North Bay Trappers, one of the leading amateur teams in Ontario. Although no practice was held yesterday, Thompson took 4 of his best shots to the stadium and had them fire away at the 20-year-old Husky. Lamarche was so impressive that Thompson signed him to a tryout contract and will take him to camp next fall. John Rigney and Bill Dietrich, who, on the authority of White Sox manager Jimmy Dykes, will be 2 of his busiest pitchers next season. Yesterday headed for Kansas City, Missouri, Dallas, Texas, and Pasadena, California. They will break their motor trip by visiting Joe Cool, Sox first baseman in Kansas City. On Wednesday, they will be joined in Dallas by Ted Lyons, the Sunday pitcher, and the 3 will complete the last westward lap together. Rigney and Dietrich are converts to a Lyons system of fast break conditioning. The 40-year-old pitcher ascribes his long career in the majors partly to a program of conditioning before the squad is called together. Their exercises will include running, tossing baseballs, and playing golf. If they can locate their manager, who is somewhere in California, they will have a golf foursome. The 2 unsigned Sox relief pitchers, Pete Appleton and Clint Brown, have made no further moves to reach contract agreements, but the Sox profess optimism that the two will come to terms before long. Thumbing through his mail yesterday, Robert Lewis, the Cubs' traveling secretary, discovered that two of his rookies are making marriage plans. Len Murillo, shortstop who was with Tulsa last year, will be married February 16th in East Boston, Massachusetts. Bob Sheffing, catcher from Rochester, will become a bridegroom late this week in St. Louis. Secretary Lewis has completed arrangements for the February 23rd Chicago getaway of 17 players, coaches Charlie Grimm and Dick Spalding and Andy Lotshaw. The group will leave at 10:15 p.m. on Santa Fe's Scout. Manager Jimmy Wilson's arrival from Philadelphia is expected today or tomorrow. Wilson will go to Catalina Island and plans to spend a few days taking in the wonders of California, which he has never visited. New York, February 3rd. A new and secretive struggle between baseball's club owners and Commissioner Kennesaw M. Landis is underway as the result of a ruling concerning the handling of minor league players purchased by major league clubs. A bulletin issued more than a week ago to the 16 major league clubs, but not revealed to other baseball people generally, invokes a new policy in bringing rookies to and keeping them in the big time, and reopens the old fight between Landis and the chain store operators. And that is news as read from the Chicago Tribune. Henry Chop reporting Tuesday, February 4th, 1941. Have a swell day.